Last week, Apple had their Hello Again event where it was expected they would be introducing a whole new line of Macs. And there was also something about Apple TV too, but nobody really cares. For the most part, they really only introduced two new Macs, the 13 and the 15-inch MacBook Pros, which, by the way, bared a strong resemblance to the 12-inch MacBook from 2015. Now, before I really start this video, I want to go back to a prediction I made in early 2015 where Apple had just released their brand new 12-inch MacBook, and a lot of people were saying that this was going to be essentially the downfall of Apple if they continued making their computers like this. I predicted that they would in fact continue making their computers like that, and that they would in fact go on to develop more of their computers along that same way, and it would in fact be a success for Apple. Now, I'm not going to say I told you so, but I am going to show you the clip. And one day, Apple is going to make their 13 and 15-inch variants of their computers exactly like this. They're probably only going to have USB-C. Maybe they'll have another port, maybe an SD card slot. I don't know. But all I do know is that once the processing power comes up, the storage goes up, they are definitely going to be incorporating this design and this thinking into their 13 and 15-inch computers. What I would wait before I go out and buy the new MacBook would definitely be more storage, a lower price point, a faster processor, and, crossing fingers, an HD webcam. I'm not going to say it, but even I was surprised by how little time it took Apple to advance their new line of computers this much. Going from a 12-inch computer that could barely pass up the MacBook Air in performance to now creating a 13 and 15-inch variety that easily blow my spec'd out MacBook Pro from 2013 out of the water. Now, surprisingly, this isn't a video of just me gloating. I'm also going to be talking about some of the specs behind the MacBook Pro as well as what they represent. So here are some of the specs to start off. One of the new things about both of these MacBooks is that there is new storage. There is PCIe-based storage, which goes up to 1 terabyte on the 13-inch MacBook Pro and 2 terabytes on the 15-inch MacBook Pro. The screens on both MacBook Pros have been improved with better color gamut and more brightness. Both models receive the butterfly mechanism in their keyboards, much like how the 12-inch MacBook had that, which gave it a very, very thin keyboard. Both are rated for 10 hours of battery life and 30 days of standby time. The 15-inch model comes in at 0.61 inches and just over 4 pounds. And the 13-inch comes in at 0.59 inches thick and comes in at just over 3 pounds. Both models come in silver and space gray, which is awesome. However, the Apple logo on the back no longer glows, which is not awesome. And both of these laptops have an HD FaceTime webcam coming in at 720p. 1080p would have been nice, but you can't have everything, and it's much better than the potato that came on the 12-inch MacBook. Now time for the two features on these computers that directly relate to the title of this video, Notebook Evolution. Now, before I lay into Apple and a few things that I will really miss, can we all just come together as a geek community and appreciate Thunderbolt 3, which is now giving us transfer speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second? That is insane. Now, going back to my prediction, I did talk about the fact that more and more products of the future would be using wireless technologies and we wouldn't have as much of a need for actual ports anymore. Even though that doesn't make me miss the SD card any less, it is kind of funny that Apple didn't exactly push any kind of technology that could have replaced the SD card. For DSLR filmmakers like me, having an SD card slot on your computer all the time is a godsend if you're on the go. And for Apple not to put forward any kind of new technologies, even Wi-Fi ready SD cards that you can just put into your Canon or your Nikon, it's really disappointing. I mean, when they wanted to show off that their MacBook could handle 2 5K displays, they had LG at the ready to show off brand new 5K displays, even though I'm not even recording in 4K yet. But instead of actually giving us actual wireless technologies, Apple is still inundating us with tons and tons of dongles. To be honest, I really feel like the relationship between us and Apple is turning into that of the Batman and the Joker in The Dark Knight. The Joker, obviously being Apple, is saying that they're not crazy, they're just ahead of their time by getting rid of the headphone jack, USB ports, and the SD card slot. And then we have become Batman, asking about headphone jacks, USB ports, and the SD card slots.
Where are they? Where are they?
It's not a sustainable relationship. And as for the MagSafe port, there is no excuse. Apple, you need to find a way to incorporate MagSafe going forward. It was single-handedly the best feature of your laptops ever. And by having it, it has saved both of my MacBooks countless times over the last 7 to 8 years. But as much as I'm annoyed with the lack of an SD card and the lack of a full-size USB port on these new computers, it is going to push more and more third parties to start developing for this new MacBook. Enough people bought it on day one in order for there to actually be a demand for these kind of changes going forward. More people are going to start developing for USB-C, and more people are going to have to start incorporating wireless into their DSLRs. So it seems weird now, but this is still a continuation of building on the change of creating a laptop that's going to force everybody else to change with the times and to develop new technologies and work with new technologies instead of holding on to older ones. And to be honest, I'm fine with that. USB 3 is great, but I would much rather have a 5 terabyte hard drive connected up to my MacBook using a Thunderbolt 3 port instead of USB 3. The other feature that definitely falls under notebook evolution is the combined efforts of the Touch Bar and that comically large trackpad. Both MacBooks received Force Touch, 3D Touch, whatever you want to call it, touch trackpads. So now they have the exact same kind of trackpads that the 12-inch MacBook has, which can be built incredibly thin, but more importantly, have absolutely no moving parts, which is amazing and is single-handedly the thing that I am most excited about because I already have a MacBook that has a busted trackpad, and by not having any moving parts, it essentially prevents the chances of ever having a broken trackpad. The giant trackpad itself isn't exactly so much a great feature as it is a hardware benefit. Not having to ever worry about a broken trackpad, but also having so much more tracking space to do multi-touch gestures and basically anything you want on something that Apple uses as a substitute for an actual touchscreen on their computers. But most of the attention for this event was directed towards that OLED touch bar at the top of the 15-inch MacBook Pro and the mid-range 13-inch MacBook Pro. This is a very exciting thing for Apple because this opens up the hardware on the Mac to the same kind of possibilities that were opened up for software when the App Store came out on the iPhone. There are actually endless possibilities that can be taken up with this new touch bar on the MacBook Pros. And the one I was most excited to see was definitely when they incorporated it into Final Cut Pro 10 for sliding your timeline and other features that can be now incorporated as physical buttons. I'm not going to say I called this too, but maybe even one day you could be running Final Cut Pro 10 on a computer that is designed just like the new MacBook. But seeing the touch bar interact with Final Cut Pro on the new MacBook at the event was the thing that convinced me that Final Cut Pro 10 is never going to run on an iPad. I'm not going to point my fingers at any companies that are trying to push the idea that laptops and tablets are becoming essentially the same thing. However, I am going to say that there is definitely a need to have them separate. Some of the things that you can do on an iPad for creation are not exactly the same things that you're going to do on a MacBook Pro for creation. And this is what brings me to this whole overarching theme of notebook evolution. The thing Apple is not trying to do is turning MacBook Pros into an iPad. They're trying to bridge the gap between the two of them so that way it's seamless, but at the same time, they're taking the best features from each and using them where they could be needed. And that's basically the gist of notebook evolution. It's going to be small changes where we need it. When we're using Final Cut Pro on a Mac, we're going to need different buttons for different screens. If we're running photos, we're going to need different physical buttons than if we were running Final Cut Pro 10. And just like Final Cut Pro, for all of the pro users out there who are complaining that this is Apple forgetting about its pro user base, this is the exact same thing that happened. This was the exact same thing that was said about Final Cut Pro in the early days. And over time, Apple slowly added the features that pro users wanted from the beginning, and then some. Now, I said way back that the 12-inch MacBook shouldn't be your first purchase, and you should probably wait for the second generation of that MacBook. Well, it's the second generation, and if I wasn't already saving up for some new camera gear, I would definitely be getting pretty excited about that new Touch Bar. Just one word of advice, Apple. The next time you're bringing about some evolution to your notebooks, make sure you include a MagSafe port. We will all thank you later.